So, Stimming, thank you very much for coming by.
Linda, thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit, what's in front of us right now?
So there's something plugged in.
Obviously.
I'm sorry, I need to. Yeah, I wanted to show you my live set, which consists of 2 Octatracks, 2 samplers, and the SH01 boutique synth from Roland. And I also got one little box, which is called IMC Instant Mastering Chain. There's even my name put on it because it's custom made for me, mostly because I needed something very, very light, but good sounding also. Light in terms of, I'm going all hand luggage. This all fits in my hand luggage. And 3 t-shirts, 3 socks, and 3 under trousers, I don't know how you call it, and a toothbrush. And that's it. That's what they allow me to get through the airplane. Anyway, so it's those 4 machines.
Nice.
And today I'm going to show you how it works, basically. I'm doing this full time since 12 years on stage, and I'm only exclusively playing live. And of course I played with Ableton for 9 years, and at the end I came to a point where I was like, okay, Ableton is so powerful, but when it comes to a live moment, it's still a program, and it doesn't step out of the program boundaries that on stage are huge boundaries, right? We agree on that. Not in the studio, but on stage. So I thought, okay, why not do a total hardware-based setup? And I was like thinking about it for 1.5 years, and then I choose to use the Octatrack because it basically does the same as Ableton, but with an interface and with a usability which is thought out by Swedish team of technicians that choose to force me to do stuff the way they think it should be done. Still, the Octatrack is a very, very flexible machine. Flexible in terms of, it's a sampler, yes, but a sampler that doesn't make any difference between one waveform short kind of sample to a 2 GB long file. It can play both and it doesn't care. So what I do is I play files like clips in Ableton, like the clips I played before. I do play them on this Octatrack, but without bass drum, clap, hi-hat, and some additional percussion. So I bounce stuff from the studio into, I call it sausage, like German sausages, and I cut them into pieces. And those pieces, mostly like 3 or 4, are inside this machine, but without bass drum, clap, and hi-hat. And I just put them in a list here. Like my track Prepare, for example, is cut into 4 pieces, which I can kind of choose, then I can play them, right? Just like I would launch a clip in Ableton. But I don't have a flashy, colorful matrix before me where I press the button and it totally conveniently, like magic, poof, launches this clip. It's a bit more complicated. Second one works as a drum sampler. So on track 1, of course, I have the bass drum, and it says here in the display, it says prepare bass drum. That's my bass drum. Yeah. So it's basically, I'm using it as a clip launching machine. Oh, by the way, it also has a time shifting algorithm. So the original file is 119 BPM, and here I'm in 123. I have to tell the Octatrack how fast the original file is, and then it's gonna morph it automatically.
Like Ableton.
Like Ableton. It sounds a bit, how can I say, it sounds not as good, but in like 4 or 5 BPM range, it's kind of okay, especially because the bass drum, the most important sound, comes out of another machine every time, just played like it is. I used to use the rhythm, but there's a trick. Like you see the crossfader on the Octatrack. That's the reason why the Octatrack is so convenient, especially for playing live. Yeah, because like the most easiest trick ever. Cutting out the bass, yeah? It's just here, even with some reverb on it. And then I'm gonna be back in for the next one. And that's very, very intuitive, and from the logic side of the machine, it's very impressive. Also the crossfader on the drum machine, it's the same. Let's go to another track. You see, I can do very complex movement just by moving the crossfader, and it interpolates to the end configuration I have on here. It's so easy. I just press it and then dial in whatever I want, and it interpolates until there. And whenever I want, I just go back. And on stage, that's the money shot. That's the okay. I can do whatever I want because I know with this movement I'm gonna be back.
Cool.
Okay, so we got those two machines, but like what I told you right now is like it's like a basic Ableton live set. I launch clips and I have a drum sampler next to it. To make my life a little bit more interesting is the little synth. With this setup, I can play a track like I made it in the studio and move to the next one. By the way, just a short one. On track 1, I have one track. On track 5, I have another one, and I can I can crossfade to the next one, just like on a DJ mixer. So this is also a bit separate, so I can have the drums from the last track and already move to the next one. And then I can sample those whole beats into one of the tracks which I have reserved for sampling, and then like switch to the next one, mangle that one, and then come in with the next bass drum. So the synth. Yeah, I need a synth. I tried very many in my stage career. It was a bit dirty, wasn't it?
Very dirty, I would say. One question that's on the top of my mind, and I would say for a lot of people stepping into live setup of DJing or performing, is when it comes to performing is controlling the levels and your mix as such, because it's not the same as being in the studio where you have the control. You're sitting in front of your desk or your computer desktop, and you can obviously control with equalizing and so on. So how do you work around that? And that's
so I think the essence of the problem you're talking about is the loudness. And when you say levels, we're talking about the mix, but also on top of a very good mix, you need something that pushes it together to make it a very strong, very loud signal. Loud in terms of RMS level loud. Yeah, that's a big issue because, like in theory, a perfect mix would be as loud as a very good master, right? But in practice, it doesn't work. So that's why I have this instant mastering chain being built. It has all this stuff I would use for mastering in a pure analog device. It's like a low and high shelf EQ built from the Trident console EQ model. It has a VCA compressor with a thrust mode from the API 2500. And then it has a makeup gain that drives Lundahl transformers. And this is basically the magic because when we were checking levels earlier, I said I'm not going to be louder than -5, simply because the transformers don't allow any more power to go through than this -5. So it's a natural limiter. And I push my signal quite hard in there. And like it's on the edge of being audible distortion. It's at the edge. Like when I was playing the synth, we had quite a bit of distortion actually. So I would do this a bit. It was a bit too loud actually. And this machine gives me the confidence in terms of, I also has a headphone out, so I listen the master out from this machine, independent from the rest. I have it on my earphones, on my in-ears. And from my experience with a setup like this, where you don't have microphones on stage, so you're not being dependent on any feedback issues, if you deliver a clear, good sounding signal, and good sounding means sounding good on these monitors, sounding good on headphones, it's going to be fine. But of course you have to know what you're doing. And that's the reason like why I'm using in-ears, because usually the monitors in clubs sound quite shit. Yeah, I say it as it is. One day in a club, which I will not name, afterwards I had a feed which went away for like 9 months. That was a exclamation mark for me in terms of, okay, I need to find a way around it. Yeah, to get it. So I'm using in-ears. And even if you don't have a machine like this, I have to admit, one day I'm gonna sell it. I'm on the
On the edge.
I'm at the edge of like finding the right setup to one day sell it to solve this problem for analog live sets, analog in terms of hardware based. But before that, I used to bring one computer on stage with Bitwig on it, which I just used as a mastering device. Okay, but then a computer needs an update and stuff like that. Of course. Yeah.
Well, that's the convenience you want to work around with this purely hardware setup, that you don't need to rely on a computer.
Yeah, and when I press play, I know that when I come back 1 week later, it's still in time, especially when you're working with Ableton and external stuff and MIDI clock. Everyone who's using MIDI clock with Ableton knows what I'm talking about. Those are they are totally tight, totally tight.
Obviously, this is the question I'm going to ask you. Do you get inspired to come up with live elements on the spot when you're doing shows? And would you use this as a form of composition in the studio?
Well, I'm using this since 3 years. I'm making my living with this setup. But of course, I got a studio, which is also I have very premium kind of stuff, not too much, but like every component. And nowadays issue in music production is we got too many options everywhere, like new machines, new ideas, like it doesn't stop, which is totally confusing and useless in a sense of making music, right? That's why maybe the old machines are so popular still, because they are limited, and like you can make your life so much easier if you say, okay, I'm just using old machines, so there's like 10. Through using this since 3 years on stage and also practicing at home, suddenly it becomes like a very, very powerful instrument in itself. And yes, you're totally right. It would be perfect to just use this for building up an idea and then like spreading it out in the studio or in the DAW. But I got so many options, but it's not in here. So I'm like really, it's like two poles in terms of sometimes I chase myself thinking, life would be so cool just to have this and maybe one other synth. So that was live, yeah, and like it's Octatrack because it has 8 tracks, and just to explain, to have like a little bit more of a practical idea, 1 and 5 is like just playing finished tracks, right? Clips, and the ones underneath are used for sampling those. So if I ever feel like, okay, I want to leave the path, I just sample a bar or two out of the original, and then, like for example, here. Now we're in the sample. Now this is going to stay like this all the time.
Now, thank you very much for sharing all this with us and going through all the details. Very nice.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.